Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we are going to continue our look at painting the ADEPTA Sororitas from Mcfarlane Toys. And in this video, we are going to work on the arms. Well, we're going to continue work on the arms, I should say, because the arm metal has already been painted, and so we're going to work on those sleeves. They have not been primed, so we're going to use some light gray from Stanores, and I'm also going to use some silly putty to mask off the armored bits of this figure's arms, I guess. Basically, all I do is I take some of the silly putty and kind of flatten it out into a sheet and then begin kind of wrapping around. I'm not too concerned about getting the inside of the cloth area, as when I primed the metal bits, primer got up into those areas, and so really we're only concerning ourselves with the main body of the cloth. I'm also not really worried about the little pegs that can reconnect back up into the main figure. I'm going to use a Badger Patriot 105. We are going to spray it around 25 psi and begin applying our primer. I really enjoy this primer as it is quite durable, and it seems to work really well with these Tamiya paints. Tamiya? I always say Tamiya. Anyway, I find it works really well with these paints as it is a polyurethane primer. And it seems to work well with these colors that I've been using for this figure. And so far, so good. And again, with the soft plastic of this figure, I was initially concerned about a lot of this. Light gray with some X20A thinner. We are going to thin this paint down. With the thinner, they often recommend it being a 1:5 ratio. So when I put like about 3-4 drops in, I barely put a drop of thinner in. And the thinner isn't really necessary when working with the Patriot 105, as it is a fairly big needle, and it seems to move the paint just fine. I'm still spraying it around 25 psi, and this is just a pretty even base coat. Now, it's actually pretty hard to see the color on top of the light gray, as they're almost the same value. The paint actually is just a little bit brighter than the primer, but that's okay. German Gray XF63 from Tamiya is next. We're going to use some X20A thinner. If I mention I'm using thinners, that's pretty much the thinner I'm using. I'm going to use a Renegade Chrome to apply this, as it has a finer needle. I believe I still use around 20 psi. I don't think I really meddled with my settings. And with this color, all I'm going to do is begin laying it in into some of the shadowy areas. So it's up close near the armpit of the sleeve, and of course I'll also apply some down some of the bigger folds running down the arm. When we get to some lighter colors, a lot of this will disappear, but it will help create some varying tone on the surface and giving us a little bit more depth. Normally within miniature painting, we do go for high contrast, but because this figure is 7 inches tall, I don't really feel it necessary to have to push the contrast values that hard, because again, I'm going to be taking pictures with this thing, and I don't really feel it necessary that we have to really push that far. It just, again, this is more of a scale modeling kind of thing as opposed to normal miniature painting. We're going to bust out some flat white XF2. We're going to slap this into our Renegade Chrome. Still spraying it around 20 psi. I did use a drop of thinner in this as well, and you can see here I'm just slightly building up, and I'm just catching the high points of those folds, and I'm slowly building up to the desired result. And in fact, I probably could have added a little bit more thinner, as I do actually like slowly building up to my desired effect, especially because when using it by the airbrush and working with it in a thinned out consistency, it allows you to slowly build up to that desired end result. And here I'm just simply removing silly putty. Again, using silly putty as a mask, there are many companies out there producing these masking putties, and essentially they're just silly putty. It's a silicone. It only sticks to itself. It doesn't stick to any other surfaces, so bear that in mind. Of course, if you do want it, you just use a piece and stick it to a surface. Actually, it doesn't do that very well. Red Brown XF64. This is going to be for the red. Now, you may recall in the previous video where I was applying the red on top of the silver and how dark it became, and it was really a pain in the butt to get to that desired saturation. So I decided I'm going to use red brown as my base for these red areas. I'm also going to paint the trim of the sleeves here. I was tempted to leave them just white, but they have this trim detail on them, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to paint it red because the interior is red, and I don't know, maybe the cloth folds up and it's a hem, you know, I don't know. I'm making this up as I go. I'm trying to stay within the argent shroud color scheme, which is why we're going to go with this brown and then going to build it into a red on the interiors. It'll become more prevalent when we get to the main robe body itself. But with the sleeve here, you know, I just wanted to echo exactly what we're going to do. So it's a bit of a spoiler here. When we get to the robe, this is pretty much going to be the same thing we're going to do for that as well. Once that's all dry, we're going to bust out the flat red XF7. This is a nice flat red. And because I went with the brown on it first and then start laying the red in, immediately I'm already enjoying laying this red down, as I do apply a fairly generous amount into the bristles and then begin moving that around. And of course, as I mentioned previously, when dealing with these paints, you do have to kind of commit to the brush stroke and work somewhat quickly. You can't linger around, you can't move your brush back and forth too much, because again, this paint does dry quite quickly, which is really great for a lot of you impatient folk out there. Some of you who want to really get into the blends and stuff like that, well, these paints, you'll have to use an additive to make that happen. Here I'm just simply scrubbing the paint inside that the robe. I don't bother pushing the red too far up into the robe. It's really just more down at where it gathers in the opening. And then of course I also catch that bottom rim of the robe itself, so the entire detail is red. I do apply 2 coats though onto these areas, building it up. I'm going to bust out the flat black, and then we're basically going to paint in the hand as well as the elbow joint, as it looks like it kind of has like a cloth like texture to it, so I assume it's like the undersuit, and basically I'm just going to paint that in. We could use a light gray or dark gray to highlight this. I don't really bother with it, especially on the hand, as I'm most likely going to be playing with this, and you know, I mean, you know, if I really want to touch it up and stuff like that, I mean, I'm not 100% sure, especially because, you know, I have not put this paint through its paces yet as far as being handled and manipulated and all that. So I'm going to assume it's going to hold up, but, you know, time will tell. We're jumping back into our flat red. We're going to bust out XF3 flat yellow. And we're going to use some paint retarder. This is the Tamiya paint retarder here that they sell within their product line, and I'm going to give it a try. I have never used it in my life. You are watching this on the camera the first time I play with this. I'm going to use 3 drops of red, and I'm going to go for 1 drop of yellow, so kind of a 3-to-1, and I'm also going to use 2 drops of the retardant. It says to use the retardant in a 1-to-5 type ratio, kind of like the thinner. So I probably have too much in there, but it didn't seem to affect it, because I've used retardants on acrylics before, and if you add too much, it just really slows down the drying time. And with this, it didn't really seem to affect the drying time too much. And in fact, it made me think that I probably could use more retardant to really get a nice smooth paint and really kind of play with it a bit more. Really all I'm doing is an edge highlight, but I was toying with the idea of kind of doing a bit of a glazing here. See how this paint operates if you're trying to glaze with it in a very thinned out fashion. And I should have added the X20A thinner to this, but I didn't at the time as I was working on this. And so quick little edge. I'm mostly happy with it. So we're going to go over to the light gray XF66. We're going to use XF2, the flat white, and the retardant. And you may notice that on the one sleeve on the right hand side, there's a little notch of white paint. In previous scenes, you probably would have noticed that I nicked the paint job. I ended up hitting it with the brown and putting a little brown spot on the sleeve. So I wanted to kind of correct that. I put the white down, and it was a little too stark on the area, so I wanted to kind of blend it. And so basically what I've done here is I've taken that retardant, taken the X20A thinner and this light gray mixture, and thinned it way down. and I've used quite a fair amount of the thinner, and actually it goes on kind of like glazing. And the fun part is that it actually dries fairly quickly. So anybody out there who is a big fan of glazing, and you were a little bit intimidated to try the same technique with Tamiya paints, it is perfectly doable. In my opinion, with these paints. I've never done this before with these paints in my life. I've always just, right out of the bottle, slapped them onto a surface and moved on, and never really got into the, the whole nitty gritty of, applying miniature painting techniques to larger stuff like this. But here you can see I'm just blending out that little boo-boo of white that I had left on there, and you can see I've managed to actually blend it and made it disappear, and I'm actually quite pleased with that. And so hopefully that helps some of you guys out there that are playing with Tamiya paints and been a little bit intimidated to try other techniques that we use in miniature painting. And I'm just going to say, go for it. Big thank you to my patrons. Without their support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below. You'll be taken off to a magical website where there are various tiers to support, and a huge thank you to everybody who does. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.